Welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. If you just got, or you're a longtime veteran CCW carrier, if you're a police department member, if you're in law enforcement at any degree or level, whether it's a sheriff, maybe you're in the military, maybe you're an EMT, whatever it is, this is a very important conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Share this with your friends and family. I'm so honored to be talking to this man, and he'll be here momentarily on the Patrick Coffin Show. This episode brought to you by Covenant Eyes. Go to covenanteyes.com. If you want your porn use to go to zero, if you want your spouse and your children protected from the monster known as the internet pornography industry, go to covenanteyes.com. My name, Patrick, gets you 30 days to test drive this bad boy. It's not just blocker. It sends every single word search, every single page you visit to a third party, so it's also accountability. No one has ever circled back saying, this is a ripoff, it was stupid. No, it works. All our devices here in Coffin Land have Covenant Eyes on them. So go to covenanteyes.com. My name, Patrick, gets you 30 days for free. As promised, Colonel Grossman is a former West Point psychology professor. He was an Army Ranger, a paratrooper. He's the author of the acclaimed book On Killing, and it was followed up by On Combat. We're going to talk about his latest book, Assassination Generation, and what killology is. I'll try to keep it to a minimum fanboy here, Lieutenant Grossman. Thanks for your time. Great to have you.
Well, Patrick, please, just Dave. Dave works for me.
Okay, great.
Right.
Well, I've been watching your videos, and I'm just about finished both these books that you were kind enough to send me, On Combat and On Killing. You have a natural storyteller's way of getting across very difficult content, which leads me to my first question. Did you, as a boy, wanted to be in the military? Did you have this warrior mindset from childhood?
When the first day of school, when I went to school, the teacher had an icebreaker, asking everybody, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be a soldier. First day of school. That's all I ever wanted to do. I enlisted in 1974, got out in 98, and I've been on the road 200-300 days a year for the last 22 years straight, training law enforcement and military across the world. And I tell you, you said my first book was on killing, and I thought what lay at the heart of combat, the thing that veterans won't talk about, is killing.
Yeah.
Then I realized that what was really important was on combat, auditory exclusion, slow motion time. Mm-hmm. But at the core of it all, as you peel away the layers of the onion, I found out in the end, the heart of the matter is the spiritual battle. Mm-hmm. The battle is good and evil, and my most recent book is on spiritual combat, 30 Missions for Victorious Warfare. Mm-hmm. And so I just went through this lifetime movement from a young private, a young sergeant, 82nd Airborne Division with Vietnam veterans all around us. We wanted to know what combat was like, and they wouldn't say. And so I wrote the book On Killing. And, this book has really got a lot to teach us right now. Yep. And I'll lay a foundation for it. People point some horrible crimes. That proves that man is a killer. No, that's an outlier.
Yeah.
That's literally one in a million.
This is one of the big eye-openers for me in going through On Killing, was the low percentage in a combat sphere of soldiers who kill the enemy. They shoot above, they shoot around.
They fail to shoot at all.
Even in that toxic, unforgiving environment, there's a deep-seated reluctance to kill. This is a revelation to me.
Yes, and I tell people, you explain to me that 99.9% of our citizens who will go a lifetime never kill anybody or even try to. Explain that. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents. In a lifetime of provocation, less than 1 in 1,000 citizens will even seriously attempt to take a human life. Explain that. Mm-hmm. Inside most healthy members of most species is pretty hardwired resistance against killing their own kind. We found out in World War II that most of the troops wouldn't pull the trigger. It was a training flaw. We taught them to shoot bullseyes. We have no known case any bullseyes ever attacking our troops. If you've been law enforcement or military since the Korean War, I guarantee you never once shot a bullseye target. Today, we make killing a conditioned response. Man-shaped silhouette pops up, you hit the target drops, stimulus response. And oh, by the way, the video games are doing the exact same thing to our children.
Yes.
It's really my most current book, one of the more current books, Assassination Generation. I gave a copy to the president. As I invited the White House to the Parkland School Massacre. President, very gracious, impressive guy in person. Just exactly a year ago, I was invited to the White House and gave a copy to the vice president, briefed him on what's going on out there. And kind of one of the key things to understand right up front is the magnitude of the threat. And here's the key. I tell my cops, I do a full day class. If you remember one thing in the first hour, remember this. Medical technology is holding down the murder rate. The number of dead people completely misrepresent the magnitude of the problem. There's a major UMass Harvard study came out around the year 2000. If we had 1960s level medical technology, the murder rate would be 3 to 4 times what it is. Just between 1960 and 2000, we cut murder to a third or a quarter of what it would otherwise be with medical technology. And the last 20 years, it's even more so. 20 years of warfare. One medical expert says tourniquets alone may have cut the murder rate in half in just the last decade. Today, every cop carries a tourniquet. Cop slaps on a tourniquet, saves a life, he's prevented a murder. We know this, isn't it? Boom, it's immediately obvious.
Right.
Medical technologies hold. Why aren't the criminologists telling us that? Why aren't the scientists telling us that? Oh, it doesn't match the narrative. The narrative is there is no boogeyman out there. You don't need a gun. You would just hurt yourself. You don't need to worry about crime. Our problem is out of control cops. That's their narrative.
Right.
And this fundamental dynamic that medical technology is holding down the murder rate, boom, we immediately get it, is buried because they don't like where that goes. That's bizarre.
If you liken it to as you're talking, I had this image of a factory. On the assembly in line are the killers, right? And on the other side, in this analogy, on the healing side, we've gotten better and better of fixing up people who have been shot, stabbed, what have you, and that artificially reduces the overall numbers. But we haven't talked about the source, which is the people who are desiring to kill someone else.
Yeah, and what we're really looking at, that's Assassination Generation, is what violent visual imagery does to children. And Covenant Eyes is a concept that we can be very careful the images you put in front of your children, because their bodies treat it like it's real. Yep. They go into fight or flight mode. We can show you the brain scans. It's in the book, the brain scan. Here's your kid's brain. Here's your kid's brain on video games.
Yep.
So just to give you one example is the defund police.
Yep.
How could any rational human being think defunding police will make the world a better place? Well, see, here's the key. When I was a kid, I grew up on Gunsmoke, Marshall Dillon, and Sergeant Friday, 1 Adam 12.
The Rifleman.
Yes, and the kids today, they grew up on Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy and Sopranos and whatever sick movie and sick TV shows on today. We brutalize those children with cops who are the bad guys. They say that the criminal forgets the victim immediately, but the victim never forgets the criminal. And when they saw evil cops on TV, movie, and video games doing evil things, they were victimized by cops. They hate cops. They fear cops from the youngest days. Yeah. We don't understand the harm that we do. Name me one cop movie in 30 years didn't have a bad cop in there somewhere. We all cheer when the bad cop dies. Denzel Washington, Training Day.
Yeah.
Denzel's a bad cop. I've seen it. They're all bad. So when a young child watched Training Day, and when the cops did evil things, it was happening to them. We don't understand the power that we create when we put these images in front of our children. And now we've got a whole portion of our society who sincerely believes if we get rid of cops, we'll get rid of the problem. It's insane, but it began when they were children, and we fed garbage and sickness, and we filled their brains. Let your kids grow up with reruns of Bonanza. Be very, very careful what you show your children. Violent visual imagery inflicted upon children is child abuse.
One of the things that you do well is just about every page you send the reader to another source, or you quote an author or a study. Have you heard of Nicholas Kardaras? Dr. Nick Kardaras was one of my earliest guests back in 2016. He has a book called Glow Kids. It's a phrase he coined to refer to the generation of kids who look at glow screens all day and night, often without any parental oversight, no limits whatsoever. And it's shaping their brains. It's changing the neural pathways. And he did a study of school shootings, starting from Columbine, and all the school shooters have this one thing in common: deeply wedded addiction to first-person shooter games. And I said, well, isn't it? I was kind of skeptical a little bit. I said, when you really mean addicted? And he said, Patrick, I have clients, teenagers and young adults, who purchase Depends diapers because they can't leave to use the restroom. That's an addiction.
You know, I commend to your attention also a book called Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer by Phil Chalmers. Phil interviewed hundreds of teen killers. He's surveyed hundreds of these kids. He's got a chapter, How to Create a Teen Killer in 10 Easy Steps. All the old problems are still there. All the old problems are still important. The one new factor every single time was an absolute obsession with media violence. You know, you remember the Walmart El Paso massacre?
I do.
The kid who committed that massacre in El Paso, this was his manifesto. He said, it's not cowardly to pick low-hanging fruit. Don't attack heavily guarded areas. Now stop there. They're looking for an easy target. They're not going to go where people can shoot back. But here's the key. To fulfill your super soldier Call of Duty fantasy. He said exactly what he's doing. Yeah. He's fulfilling his super soldier Call of Duty fantasy. Here's the Parkland school killer. Parkland school killer. Folks, that the Miami Herald says that the Miami Herald says he played video games 8, 12, 15 hours a day. It was kill, 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 blow something up, kill some more all day long. The Parkland school massacre. Another one, the South Florida Sun Sentinel. He was an avid video game player. They're the only ones who talked about it. Isn't this important?
Yeah.
15 hours a day, the all embracing, all encompassing thing in this kid's life is the violent video games. Isn't that worth mentioning?
Yeah.
All they want to talk about is a gun. Yeah. And they've got, they can understand is they have blood on their hands. The sick TV shows, the sick movies, and especially the sick video games are creating sick children, and they know it. So they desperately got to point the finger somewhere else. Oh, it's all about the guns. And what about those semi-automatic high-capacity military weapons? M1 carbine. 6 million M1 carbines were built in World War II. They flooded the market. They were junk. They melted them down for scrap. 20, 30-round magazine, semi-automatic, high-capacity military weapon. The guns didn't change.
Yeah.
There's no evil gun out there. We changed. Our children changed.
When someone goes after a crowd with a machete, we don't call for machete control laws. Or on September 11th, there wasn't a call for 757 control laws, right?
You know, in England, they're trying to ban knives. They've got chefs. They've got chefs in England. There's no culinary reason why any knife would have a point. There's no culinary reason why any knife should be over 3 inches. They got chefs saying that. England is trying to ban all knives with a point and all knives over 3 inches. They're going to ban all machetes. They are seriously trying to do it. What comes next? Sticks, rocks, clubs? When do you stop blaming the object and start blaming the individual? You see, that points the finger back at TV, movie, and video games. They have blood in their hands, and they will not say. I'll give you one example. I co-authored a book with Glenn Beck, Control, Exposing the Truth About Guns. Glenn Beck, great guy in person. I wrote more of the book than he did. He gets his name on the front. New York Times bestseller list. Not one single review. Think about that. New York Times bestseller list. Not a single review. You can attack the New York Times bestseller. What you cannot do is absolutely refuse to talk about it. They have blood on their hands, and they are desperately involved in pointing the finger somewhere else. But we got to look at what we're putting in front of our children and what we fed them at a young age, and we pay a terrible price for that.
Maybe we can go one degree deeper, and that is, what is it about the family structure and the experience of these young kids that leads them to be drawn to hours and hours of this distractive and hyper-realistic, now with VR technology, right? Virtual reality, you're talking highly immersive, vividly realistic fake environments. How much of this is, what's that?
Yeah, 2 things are drawing them to this.
Yeah.
Number one, to understand the commercials. The commercials are worth vast amounts of money because they influence your behavior. What's in between the commercials has no impact on our children. So the commercials, they flat nowhere worth vast amounts of money. And what we have created is a society who wants stuff, a society who needs stuff. The commercials are designed to do 2 things, make you overeat and be dissatisfied with every possession. So we've got 2-parent families who never have enough money. We never have enough money. The commercials are telling us we need this, we need that. The commercials are designed with vast amounts of research and ability pounding into our brains. You never have enough. You need more stuff. You have to both work. We have to work overtime. Just feeding your family is not enough. You need a bigger house and a bigger room. My wife and I love the Home and Garden Show. We call it house porn and food porn. We got the food channel and the house channel, and they're food porn and house porn, telling you never be satisfied with what you have, number one. And so we've got two-parent families who are both working their hearts out, trying to get this stuff. What they really need to do is give time to their children. Number two, fatherless families.
Yep, bingo.
Destroyed the dynamic of the nuclear family. We've taken the father out of their lives, and we've destroyed whole portions of civilization by destroying the nuclear family. And it's all about bringing money back to them, creating a civilization who never has enough. And one of the things to understand is sleep deprivation. In the military, sleep-deprived soldiers are 5 times more likely to take their life. Sleep deprivation is one of the greatest predictors of suicide. Sleep deprivation is also one of the greatest predictors of traffic deaths. Now, worldwide, suicides have exploded. Teen suicides, tweenage suicides, they call them 11, 12-year-old teenagers.
Yeah.
In America, teenage girls' suicide has tripled per capita in just the last decade. Now, we got sleep deprivation created by the cell phones and the text messaging, and especially those addictive video games. People play the games till they die. Adults wear diapers when they play them because they can't leave the game. And children are being destroyed by these games. They're digital crack, and they're selling them to children. And the state of California, it's in my book, Assassination Generation, the state of California, the home of Hollywood, the home of Silicon Valley, California overwhelmingly voted to regulate children's access to violent video games. The video game industry fought them all the way to the Supreme Court. Video game industry said we have a constitutional First Amendment right to sell any game to any kid at any age. And they conned a bunch of old men. The Supreme Court, they never played Pong in their life. They conned a bunch of old men to turn off the Supreme Court law to sell any game to any kid at any age. They are not going to tell you, don't give your kid a cell phone. They're not going to tell you, don't let your kid play video games. Enforce the rating systems at the bare minimum. Limit their times. They won't tell you that because they want. And the head of Netflix, one of the big media providers, he said, my competition is not other providers. My competition is sleep. So we're in the middle of a worldwide epidemic of sleep deprivation. It's suicides and traffic deaths have exploded, and it is the new factor. 2 major killers of our kids, suicide and traffic deaths. So a cop came up to me during one of my classes during the break. And I put this story in my book on spiritual combat. Mm-hmm. He said, I had a good girl. He said she was an A student. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. He said, so I trust her. Let her keep her cell phone. A little while later, she took her life. He said, my little girl took her life. And we never knew the hell she was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone. Night after night of ceaseless, relentless, vicious bullying.
Yep.
And he can't just ignore that stuff. We're not wired that way. She's up all night long trying to defend herself. He said, I knew my little girl was bullied to death. What I didn't understand until now, she was sleep deprived, tormented, and bullied to death in front of my eyes. I let it happen. He said, I can't ignore that text message in the middle of the night. How can we expect our kids to? The third major killer that exploded worldwide is the opiate epidemic.
Yes.
Prescription opiates have always been there. Why do people need prescription opiates? Sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. The tendons and muscles never fully relax. I spent a whole hour on sleep with my cops and my military. Sleep hacks and sleep dynamics that we've got to use. Sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. And the opiate epidemic. Doc, I heard all the time, give me a pill fix. You don't need a pill. You need more sleep, and you need to knock off the caffeine shortly after lunch. That's stopping you if you get in deep cycle sleep. Yeah. 3 major killers have exploded worldwide. Opiate overdoses, suicides, and traffic deaths. And there's one new factor. Now, they will not tell you your kid doesn't need a cell phone. They will not tell you, take your cell phone away from your kid when he goes to bed at night. They will not tell you, strictly enforce the rating systems and limit their time in front of these addictive video games. They have blood on their hands. And all they have tried to do is work desperately, decade after decade, to do one thing, to make more money, to sell more of their products. Mm-hmm. And they will never tell you this product is harmful, you should not give it to your children. But we need to understand what's going on. And again, all in my book, Assassination Generation.
There's definitely a perfect storm of all kinds of stressors like this. I'm thinking about the normalization of divorce, the pro-divorce culture, the proliferation of any form of contraception thrown at tween girls in school. You can get the pill prescribed, but you can't get a Tylenol.
Yes.
And this is a child of the late 60s. I've thought a lot and written about the 1960s, and things seem to have fallen apart after 1965. In 1968, you had the Tet Offensive. You had Martin Luther King Jr. murdered, Bobby Kennedy Jr. Murdered. The French government was almost toppled. You had violence on university campuses for the first time. Paul Johnson, a British historian, said that 1968 was the year of America's suicide attempt. And then from 1965, this is a really good metric, the Best Picture Oscar went to The Sound of Music in 1965. By 1969, 4 years later, Midnight Cowboy, about a homosexual, drug-addicted, this 4 years. It was the first rated X film to be mainstreamed.
Right up until the early 1960s, Hollywood and television operated by code.
Right.
They say, we know our stories influence people's behavior. They operated by a code. We accept responsibility for our stories. We know our stories influence behavior. And then in the 1960s, they threw that code away. Now, they flat admit that a 30-second commercial will influence the behavior of vast numbers of people. Everything in between that commercial for year after year after year fed to your children has no impact. They will not accept any responsibility. But here's the key. This is the addictive ingredient. Violent visual imagery is the addictive ingredient. We're biologically primed to seek survival data. Mm-hmm. For children, if there's violence in their environment and they're not immediately personally threatened, their survival demands that they watch it. We put Power Rangers and Captain Kangaroo side by side. Mm-hmm. And Captain Kangaroo, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers is dead. Captain Kangaroo is dead. The Power Rangers live on and on. Children are riveted to Power Rangers. Hunt, kicking and hiding and fighting. Boom. They're biologically primed to seek that data. And so what they've done is they fought tooth and nail, like the tobacco industry. They fought tooth and nail to sell a toxic substance to children. My dad started smoking when he was 5 years old, 1940. 5-year-old kid plunked a nickel in the quarter. Hey, kid, candies rot your teeth. Cigarettes are good for you. He spent his nickel at 5 years old. That was cool. Candy rots your teeth. Cigarettes are good for you. They believe that.
Yeah, they would advertise it as food, right? Tastes great. Philip Morris, great taste.
We're the sick industry being fed to our children. As a minimum, protect your children. Protect what you put in front of their eyes. And understand how sick and perverted and disgusted almost anything after the 1960s can be. And recognize how we have to limit what's in front of their eyes and realize that when they see violence, it's real. And when they see cops being evil, they are taught for the rest of their life to fear cops and to hate cops. It is so very important to understand the violent and visual imagery put in front of our children. Mm-hmm. So are you with me so far on the number of dead people underrepresent the situation? Yeah. Let me show you something else. And I'm such a fan of the whole idea of the coffin nation, of a sanctuary of willing to find kindred spirits and a reinforcing cycle. But let's look at the number of people murdered in America. Now, remember, medical technology is holding down the murder rate. So
move it a bit to your right, Dave, if you would, just to move it. Yeah. Okay. Good.
In 2006, 17,000 Americans murdered. 2008, 16,000. 2009, 15,000. 2010, 14,000. This is the number of people being murdered going down because of medical technology. And then in 2015, 2016, stayed up there in 17. The murder rate exploded like nothing we have ever seen. Now, Patrick, I presented this to 400 sheriffs a year ago at the National Sheriff's. 400 sheriffs. I said, sheriffs, how many of y'all saw this? Why not? If this is the stock market, we hear about it every day. It was inflation rate or interest rate. We'd hear about it once a month. How could this have happened throughout the year and not be in the news? They simply refuse to report it. And remember, it's actually worse than it looks because medical technology is holding it down, the number of dead people. The censorship of the news are the most dramatic and important factor that may have been happening in the last couple of years. And the FBI guys that do this data, the FBI guys call it the Ferguson Effect. Remember Ferguson? Yeah.
Ferguson, Missouri. Hands up, don't shoot, which never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The FBI guy said we've created a sense of anger. Think of this. We have created a sense of anger in our criminals. We've told them the cops are the bad guys. and the criminals are the good guys. So let me give you an angle on that whole business. And a great old American, Justice Louis Brandeis, Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. And we got sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. Now we got mayors telling the cops to stand down.
Yeah.
Louis Brandeis said crime is contagious. If the government becomes a lawbreaker, or if the government tells you to disobey the law, it breeds contempt for law. It invites every man to become a law himself. It invites anarchy. That's what you're looking at. Anarchy, contempt for law. Government breaking the law. Government's telling you to disobey the law. And that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And it's going to keep getting worse. We got to circle the wagons and keep our powder dry, Patrick. You got to believe in our way of life. I am my family's secret service. You know, around the world, if you're a politician or rich, you have armed security. But the peasants and the peons will never have armed security. In America, my family's life is as valuable as the president's family. I am my family's secret service.
Amen.
I provide the security for my family. I am an armed and trained American at the very highest level. And every citizen is of equal value. That's not true in any other nation on the planet, with few exceptions. The politicians have armed security. Let's watch those dirtbag millionaires go with that armed security for a year and see what happens. But the peasants and the peons will never have that same right. We live in a nation for a while, for as long as we can keep it, in which we're authorized to protect our loved ones. And one answer right up front is understand how bad it is. Circle the wagons, keep your powder dry, train yourself and prepare yourself, and believe in who we are, armed American citizens dedicated to protecting our way of life and protecting our families. And we're sheepdogs under the authority of the Great Shepherd, endowed with our creative with inalienable rights, empowered by my Constitution and keep and bear arms, inspired by my fourth office to fight for this land I love. I am a sheepdog under the authority of the Great Shepherd. And this is as far as the minions of hell are going.
The law is the great teacher. And you look at someone like Mayor Bill de Blasio, to use one concrete example, praising the actions of his daughter, who got herself arrested in a protest that turned violent, in which cars were burned. You're praising criminal activity on your own family. So what's the message to angry young potential criminal or actual criminal?
Let's ask Louis Brandeis again.
Yeah.
Crime is contagious. It invites every man to put a law on himself. It breeds contempt for law. It invites anarchy. That's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. The breakdown of our civilization, the breakdown of our way of life. And we've got to reject that. And you're right. The law is a great teacher. But when we ignore the law, we're teaching a very bad lesson. When we're complimenting criminals. You know, I'm a burnout old geezer, 64 years old. Maybe I lost it. I always thought if you're criminal, you live your life in fear. You're criminal. You've broken the law. You should be paranoid. The world really is out to get you. And now we've told a generation of criminals, the cops are the bad guys. Yeah. And you're the good guys. And that is the single most destructive thing you could do to any civilization. It breaks down the very concept of law and order of our civilization. And God's word says over and over again that he has put the police there as a minister for justice and to strike fear in the hearts of wrongdoers. And we've turned that whole equation upside down.
One of the points you make in, I believe it's on Combat, is that if we eliminated doctors or teachers, you know, we would stumble, we would fall in certain ways, that we'd go backwater in certain technological ways, and we'd have to homeschool. But if we got rid of law enforcement and the military, that thin blue line, it's called the thin blue line for a reason. That's the end, right? That's what are there, 3,000 sheriffs in the country?
Yes, 3,000 sheriffs, 12,000 chiefs.
And that is serving 300 plus million. Take away that thin blue line, and that's the beginning of chaos and utter anarchy. Is that overplaying the card?
1.5 million in prison, another million in jail. Let them all go for a day. They promise they'll come back. Empty all the jails, empty all the prisons, turn off all the laws, one day without justice. What would it be like? Well, like the movie The Purge? No. The Purge didn't empty prisons. The Purge didn't turn off all laws. It would be chaos and anarchy. We can go a day without food. We can go a day without water. One day without justice. Whenever the piece is back together again. Empty all the prisons, empty all the jails, turn off the laws for one day. We would never put the pieces back together again. The foundation of every civilization, the social contract. You obey the law, you pay your taxes, and we'll help keep you safe. Ain't that the deal? The Pharaoh, the Romans, everybody, U.S. from the very beginning. You obey the law, you pay your taxes, we'll help keep you safe. If we can't keep them safe, why would they uphold their part of the deal? The foundation of every civilization is the social contract is about public safety, and public safety is dying and falling apart before our eyes. And we got to stand up for them. We've got to support them and let them know we love them and appreciate them.
I've made it a practice to do that, not just with military, but police officers. Thank you for your service. You can be in the Army for decades and never really been in a combat zone, but every shift is a combat zone for law enforcement.
You know, I got a son with 9 combat tours. He says, I come home and turn it off. That cop can never turn it off.
Yeah.
That cop will find people in the store that he put in jail that he's got to live with. Him and his loved ones are there with him and his family, and he runs into somebody who's put in jail. That cop can never turn it off. And, you know, one of the things I tell people is, you've heard of the Posse Comitatus Act. By law, the U.S. military cannot get involved in American soil. We're the only nation on the planet that plays by that rule. And what that means is, when international terrorists strike over here, we have given the mission of the local police. We cannot operate any other way. We're at war, and from one narrow perspective, they are the frontline troops in this war. On 9/11, it wasn't 400 military personnel who died going up the steps of the World Trade Center. On 9/11, it was 400 cops and firefighters going up those steps who died. When they attack over here, you've given the mission of the local law enforcement. We're the only nation on the planet that says our military, with the exception of the National Guard, and they'll tell you, ain't showing up no time soon, our military cannot get involved in American soil. This is something we don't even understand. We have given them the mission that elite military units have around the world. The local police are as deeply embedded in this war as our troops over there are. They get to turn it off when they come home. The local police never get a chance to turn it off. Live ammo combat patrol ever working their lives. And they deserve our support, and they deserve us to stand up behind them and to stop giving our children anything that will say the cops are the bad guys.
One of the anecdotes you tell is a shooting on the 12th floor, and I think it was EMT professionals and some cops get in the elevator, and ding, ding, and up it goes. And you can imagine the heart rate and the cortisol and the adrenaline dump going on. And the non-sheepdogs press their backs against the wall of the elevator, and the door opens, and they press it even harder. The sheepdog warriors head to the sound of the gun, which is a long-winded way of me asking you, do you think sheepdogs are born or made?
You know, whenever you get a nurture-nature problem, it's always both. It's always both. And now we have epigenetics that even makes it more complex. But the only thing we can control in the nurture-nature equation, the only thing we can control is the nurture part of that equation, to build them and to grow them. You know, one of our books is the Sheepdog Kids book, and it's deep and it's powerful. And talk about the sheep will die to protect the ones they love. Only the sheepdog loves enough to die for other people's loved ones. But sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. Did we get you one of these when we mailed the other books to you?
Tragically, no. It looks awesome, though.
I love it.
And I'm going to put this in the show link as well at patrickcoffin.media. Great.
Sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. It got the original Sheepdog essay in the back came out of on combat, the sheep, the wolf, and the Sheepdog essay in the back. It's really deep. It's been touching a lot of lives. But we can give them good things. We can give them valid things. You know, when you talk about cops, let me show you listeners something. I'm kind of famous on my presentations for the big graphics that we do.
Yep.
And I talk about being a paladin, a protector, a worthy knight. Half guns will travel, read the card of a man. A knight without armor in a savage land. Paladin, paladin, where do you roam?
Yep.
Paladin, paladin, far, far from home. They really are knights. They really are paladins. They don armor. They hang a weapon on the hip, and they hang that shield on the left side. And on that shield is under whose authority they go forth, administer justice, and do good deeds in the land. If that is not a knight, if that is not a paladin, you tell me what is. This new dark and desperate hour, a new knight, a new paladin, a champion of the weak and the oppressed, police, move toward the sound of the guns while everybody else runs away. And we desperately need our sheepdogs, and we need to honor them. And God's word tells us, Romans chapter 13, the magistrate beareth not the sword in vain, that he has that God hates lawdoers and he hates wrongdoers and evildoers and breaking the law. Psalms 11 says God hates lovers of violence. If we love that violent movie, that violent television, that violent video game so much we can't protect our children from it, who do we really love? Yeah. But again, in America, we are a nation of nobility. We are all knights. We are all paladins. We have all been given the right to bear weapons and protect our loved ones if we choose to do so. And that's something very powerful about our nation we're fighting for.
The line from St. Paul in Romans, I like pointing out that those lines were written by a system that early Christians didn't like. But there's the law being the great teacher again. God puts authority over us, even if we don't like the, certain aspects of the system in which we live.
And to strike fear in the hearts of evildoers. And if you don't like the law, work to get it changed. But don't tell people to disobey the law. Then very bad things happen. And that's what sanctuary cities and sanctuary states have done. And now mayors that are telling their cops to stand down while violence happens. Businesses and lives are being destroyed while the mayor does nothing. This is evil. This is flat evil happening in our nation before our very eyes. His destruction of property and lives is happening, and the mayors do nothing. And we're seeing where this evil leads. We see where these evildoers and these wrongdoers are leading us. And we got to move away from that to every bit of our ability and support and know God's word and know what it is that God tells us to do. One other thing that you may have read, I always talk in my presentation about men and women who go toward their death. How do you get somebody to die? 400 cops and firefighters who went toward the danger and died on 9/11, while tens of thousands ran away. How do you get somebody to die? Well, in nature, the one place where we see the instinct of self-preservation constantly canceled out is a mama critter who will die for her babies, her young, but she won't die for anybody else's babies. In combat, we know if we throw a bunch of strangers front lines together, men and women don't know each other, don't care about each other. As soon as it's dark, as soon as people are dying, they're out of there. You put together a band of brothers and sisters, men and women who know and trust one another, they'll fight long and hard. Why? For each other. Audie Murphy was the most decorated American soldier in World War II. Audie Murphy was asked one time why he did it. His answer was very simple. They were killing my friends. All these words revolve around, all these tastes revolve around one thing. The most powerful force on the planet. What quenches fear? What quenches fear as water quenches fire?
Yeah.
Love quenches fear as water quenches fire. The mama critter loved the babies more than life itself. Audie Murphy loved his fellow soldiers more than life itself. And Christopher Amoroso and 400 other cops and firefighters who died on 9/11. The mama critter will die for her babies. She won't die for anybody else's babies. But we'd say the sheep will die to protect the ones they love. Only the sheepdog and the great shepherd love enough to die for other people's loved ones. Only the sheepdog and the great shepherd love enough to die for other people's loved ones. John 15:13. Greater love is known than this. They give their life for their friends, but there's many ways to give your life. Greater love is known than this. They give their life for their friends, but there's many ways to give your life.
Is it 1 John? I want to say 1 John 3. Perfect love casts out not some fear, not most fear, but all fear.
Yes. We're not given us fear, but a sound mind and love. Yes. And
maybe this might be another layer of the onion here. You've got the normalization of the divorce culture and the refusal to look at the damage that it does to kids. You've got the sexual revolution and all its failures, which are hiding in plain sight. You've got a culture of libertinism and utter independence from any kind of authority. And then beneath that, you've got this massive apostasy, this massive loss of faith. If you read Benjamin Franklin and Madison and Jefferson and Washington, all the framers of the Constitution, these were either Christian men or men who believed that the Word of God was authoritative, or at least they were deists. When you look, check out a press release of the ACLU or half of the missives from certain governors and so on. It's almost a different country altogether.
Yes.
So speak a little bit to how the America experiment is not going to work unless it's a moral and religious people.
The thing to realize, I told the vice president that what we're going to see next is daycare massacres. Belgium had a daycare massacre. China's had repeated daycare massacres. We're going to see school bus massacres. The things that are not being reported are mind-boggling. A little over a year ago in Italy, an Italian bus driver hijacked a busload of 51 children, soaked them with gas, and set them off with 51 kids on board. Now, the Italian police were brilliant. One of the kids called on his cell phone, said he's soaked us with gas, and he says, we're all going to die. They had fire trucks and a roadblock. They hammered at the fire trucks from every side. This is a European bus. They busted the windows. Not a single kid died. When even badly burned, not a single kid died. With an American bus, I tell my cops, you're going to have to park right next to it, get on the roof, and bust windows and yank kids out the window. 6 months after this incident, I trained FDNY, Fire Department of New York. I had the chief of their counterterrorism division there, and they had never heard of it. 6 months after the incident, never heard of it. A busload of Italian children. I tell the vice president, he really didn't want to hear it. Great man, virtuous, honorable, good man. I told him every step of the way I predicted was coming. What's coming next is daycare massacres, school bus massacres, and somebody's going to plow through those kids in front of the school with a vehicle 100 miles an hour. We are in the middle of a descent to evil. The next most evil act, the thing to shock us and stun us. We want to pretend it will never happen. It's coming like a train. We are on a descent to evil. And the thing to understand is we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We are wrestling against forces of evil in this world. And they will bring us deeper and deeper into paths of evil. When you see that daycare massacre, I pray that I'm wrong. When you see that school bus massacre, when you see somebody plowing through those kids in front of the school 100 miles an hour, which is happening around the world, vehicles as weapons of mass murder, move those kids now, put out those bollards now, train those bus drivers now, and do the same security in the daycare that we have in the schools. But when those things happen, you say Grossman said that was coming. How could I know? Because and we are fighting against forces of evil. And you find the most evil, horrendous, shocking, stunning action that could possibly happen. And that's what's coming. We are truly in a war against forces of evil. And they use human instruments to do their deeds. But we have to fight on that level. We have to fight on that spiritual level. I tell my cops all the time, cops, you see evil stuff. And you cannot deny the presence of evil in this world. You cannot fight evil without a force for good on your side. Yeah. And that's to peel away the layers of the onion. Ultimately, we're looking at the eternal battle against evil. And we have given evil more than just a foothold in our nation. We have given evil an entrenched position within our nation. When we see those daycare massacres, when we see those school bus massacres, when we see there's somebody plowing through those kids in front of the school, you say that's evil. What was left to stun us? What was left to shock us? And how could these children commit these crimes? How could we have fed them a sick society that allows them to descend into evil and lawlessness and to take away the one unifying force that's ever been in this nation? And that's our belief in God, our belief in a God and a responsibility to that God. And to know that we build up our treasures in heaven, not here on earth. Sometimes greater love is known than this. They give their life for their friends. But there's many ways to give your life. And sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice.
I've been very blessed, Dave, to interview trained exorcists and people who assist exorcism teams. And this spiritual battle thing that some people deny, I mean, if you don't realize there is a spiritual battle, in a way you're already on the wrong side, because the devil loves people on the fence, comfortable up in the stands. I did a live stream with a guy called Lieutenant Paul Clay, a 32-year vet of the LA County Sheriff's Department, wonderful guy, on fire Catholic man. And we were talking about the roots of the Black Lives Matter. Paul happens to be black himself. And 2 of the 3 founders of BLM are lesbian, trained Marxists. So they have all been wounded by their fathers. So look at the phrase. It's sort of an iconic icon, right? The fist, smash the patriarchy. Well, patria is the Latin word for father. Patriarchal, patriotic. This is basically kill the father. That's the message.
Yes.
And the devil has a father wound.
Yes.
Think of it. And he wants us to join his rebellion, his rage that will never end against our common Father. To me, that's lightning, and that's a very important insight.
Wow. And again, people look at exorcism and say, that's out there. No. What do we got to lose? We have everything to gain and nothing to lose by drawing upon those dynamics. Evil has always been there. So whatever force for good. I tell people, if your God is hiding under a rock, and you and a handful of people only knew about it, then you don't have much of a God. My God would have his churches in every city, in every land, in every corner. My God would have his word in every hotel room around the world and translated to every language. If there's a God who's worthy of that name, your God hiding under a rock, your New Age God that only you and a few others know about, that's not much of a God, buddy.
The blob God. New Age blob God.
My God told me from the beginning what to do. He's always been there, and he will continue to be there. And we can tap into that tradition and that heritage of our church. I try to cut across all traditions and denominations and get the fundamentals that we all share and understand how bad the situation is. And one other thing, just recognize that it is worldwide. People say, it's not happening in other nations. Yes, it is. Go to Wikipedia and look up world homicide rates. Click on the rate, click it again, get the worst ones on top. The worst nations on the planet, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico is number 21. And
Mexico's 21?
Mexico's number 21. This is always shifting day by day. Right, the day I downloaded this, Mexico 21. Folks, El Salvador, Honduras, Venezuela, Jamaica, you could not pay me enough money to take my family vacation in Jamaica. But here's the key. Folks, Iraq is number 52. Afghanistan is number 82. I would rather take my family vacation to Iraq than Mexico. And you and I remember a time we went across the border in Juarez and Tijuana, had a nice meal, did a little shopping, and nobody popping over the border. All these nations have in common? Unarmed citizens. Citizens.
Yeah.
So the anti-gun guys say, well, among developed, how do you define a developed nation? Well, all of those ones, anybody with more crime than us is not a developed nation, see? So they kick all these out and they say among developed nations, our murder rate's very high, but compared to the rest of the world, it's a lie. How'd that gun law work out in Mexico? How those gun laws working out? But understand that it's happening across Europe. I'm one of the first people to really print the Interpol data between 1977 and 2003, that the rate in which people try to kill each other, the murder rate underrepresents the problem.
Yep.
Within each nation, the way they define serious assault changes, but the increase within each nation is valid. And violent crime doubles, triples, quadruples, quintuples. So why is my data stop at 03? They stopped reporting the data. Go to the Interpol website, look at their biannual crime report. They stopped reporting the data. I guarantee if it better, they'd be saying so. Across Europe, violent crime doubles, triples, quadruples, quintuples. No idea how bad it's been for the last decade and a half because they won't tell us. If you anything you want, if it's better, they'd be saying so. Worldwide.
So the Latin phrase cui bono comes to mind. For what good? Who benefits from no longer counting the figures?
Yes. Apple company benefits when you buy your kid a cell phone. The movie people benefit when you binge watch a movie. The video game industry may be one of the most evil of all industries out there. The video game industry wins when you play the game all night long and show up to work sleep deprived. Yeah. Remember, sleep deprivation creates impaired judgment. It's like being drunk. If someone who's showing up to work drunk, you kick his tail. If he shows up sleep deprived, because he played video games all night long, he needs his tail kicked.
Yeah, you mentioned Apple. I was blessed to interview Abigail Schreier, Wall Street Journal writer, basically a woman of, I would say, the soft left. She writes like a dream. She wrote a book recently called Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Mania Seducing Our Daughters. And what an eye-opener, man. She says it all spiked after 2007 with the invention of the iPhone. The day and night propagandizing. If you're 11, 12, 13 years old and you're a girl and you feel the slightest bit tomboyish, you're trans. And there's no counter voices. So if your kids are in that echo chamber called social media culture, it's toxic and it can be deadly.
Yes. The bullying and let's go ahead and talk about masks. We talked about that before.
Yeah. I want to get your take on the CCP virus, oligarchic, all across the world, our societal willingness to burn the house down to kill a termite.
All right, to burn the house down to kill a termite. That's good. My book on killing. Google Scholar says it's been cited 2,700 times in scholarly works, been translated to 8 languages, 500,000 copies sold in English alone. And the heart of the book revolves around this right here, the relationships and the dynamics that empower killing.
Yep.
And the most important dynamic of all is the relationship between the killer and the victim. If we put a wall between the killer and the victim, if we put a mask on the victim, if we put a hood on the victim, we greatly increase violence. Somebody's been kidnapped. If they put a hood on you, you're vastly more likely to be murdered because they don't have to look you in the eyes when they kill you. They don't have to look at their face when they kill you.
Yep.
We dehumanize people by putting masks on. Heart rate goes up, anxiety goes up, cardiac arrest and cardiac problems and anxiety and depression and violence increases by putting a mask on people. It is possibly the single most harmful social interactive dynamic you could possibly do. We know that online bullying is horrendous. We know that online people will say things and do things they would never do face to face.
Yep, 100%.
Mask on us, we do the same thing. Put a mask on them, put a mask on us. Now we've empowered it. And then we got people wearing a mask and he doesn't have a mask. I have a mask on, he doesn't. He's evil, he's bad. And they attack those people.
Right, you got a scapegoat. Yep, you got to burn the witch.
Yes, and far worse than being black or white, far worse than discerning ourselves by what color we are, is the fact that they don't have a mask and I do. And I have isolated myself and I have surrounded myself with this dynamic of wearing masks. It is the single most interpersonal, hostile and dynamic and harmful thing we could possibly have done. It's right out of my book. Enabling violence by creating social distance and psychological distance between human beings by wearing masks. And then we got some movie star who says, oh, everybody should wear masks. You only go out of the house, they go to dinner, and your employees work the yard, and your employees go shopping for you. They got to wear a mask. Let's see you wear a mask 8 hours a day in front of hostile people and see how you react. Yeah. Some Hollywood star says, oh, yeah, everybody should have a mask. And he sits in his mansion and never interacts with the real world. These Hollywood stars are embedded in this society of evil. That's why they're all attacking our president. They're all attacking conservative values. They're completely invested in the evil industry. They have blood on their hands that feeds garbage to our children. And then they turn around. They're isolated from the world. They don't have to go shop. They don't have to do yard work. They don't have to interact with people wearing a mask all day long. But they declare there's nothing wrong with wearing a mask. Tom Hanks, God bless him, Tom Hanks, great actor, done some great movies. He's sitting in his mansion saying everybody should wear masks. Just think for a minute what you're saying. Just think for a minute the isolation that's been created, the anxiety that's been created, and the breakdown and harm to our civilization is being created by saying everybody should wear a mask. Oh, just stop and think for a minute. Second and third order effects. And they never think about second and third order effects of what they're doing. Burn the house down to kill the termites. That's what's happening. And greater harm is being done by that dynamic.
I'll mention a study. I think it's contained in a book by Mark Regnerus and Bradford Wilcox. God has given me a really strange memory for things that I find important. They just kind of stick like super glue.
Praise God.
But I can't tell you which movie I watched with my wife. It's a weird blind spot. But this study focuses on the elites, primarily in Hollywood and Silicon Valley, the people who create the companies, the entrepreneurs who drive all the technology, and the producers and actors who influence us sideways through entertainment. In their own lives, they act like a Christian family from Nebraska. They want walls. They want armed security. They don't want their kids using their own stuff. Steve Jobs famously said the same thing. So it would be a compliment to hypocrisy to call them hypocrites. What they're doing is living according to common sense, the way you and I would, and yet they're making an obscene pile of cash off technology that's literally killing everyone.
They're literally drug dealers. And it is a foolish drug dealer who takes his own drugs. They're drug dealers. They know the death that they're peddling, and they know how harmful it is. They protect their own families, their own children. They're like some Colombian drug lord. They are no different than some evil Colombian drug lord who feeds death and horror and drugs and then protects his own family. That's what we're looking at. They're sold out to this evil, and of course they're deeply invested in attacking the current president because anybody who points a finger back at them, anybody that doesn't bow to them and bow to their altar and bow to their idol, anybody who isn't wowed by Hollywood is the bad guy. Anybody that doesn't bow to Hollywood and doesn't bow to the networks and all those people on the networks, and they're evil and they need to be attacked and destroyed. And we are in this battle against evil, and they're no different than some sick Colombian drug lord out there. Stay away from their product. They won't give their product to their own. They won't eat their own product. They won't let their children eat their product. You protect your children even more so. You got to protect those little ones.
Dave, tell us about a sheepdog training for Christians in church environments. I'm very interested in this because the evil men who want to do us harm, they might be evil, but they're not stupid. You cited one of the manifestos, right? Go after soft targets. Churches that advertise, oh, we're pacifists here, no guns allowed. You might as well put a neon sign for a psycho killer to arrive. Yeah. So what? How do you train, and how does it all work?
You know, what we tell people right up front, and when we talk about church safety, you know, people say, well, won't you think God will protect you?
Right.
Won't God protect you from fire?
Pray, pay, and obey. Right.
For sure. Why do you need that fire exit sign? We tell half the cost of a modern building goes into fire code. Fireproof material for the structure of the building versus cheapest alternative. Fireproof material for interior furnishings versus cheapest alternative. Fire sprinkler system under pressure for the lifetime of the building. Electrical system brought up to fire code. Double the electrical system, run wiring to every fire exit, every fire alarm. So if you show us your faith in God, throw away that fire extinguisher, throw away those fire exit signs, show us your faith. That ain't how it works.
Handle the snakes.
God gave you the brains and the tools to protect yourself from fire. If you don't use those things and people die, don't you dare blame God. And God gave you the brains and the tools to protect people from violence. And he put you in a nation where you can do those things. And if you don't protect your people from violence and bad things happen, don't you blame God. We can have a fire exit and fire extinguisher, but when it comes to violence, and here's the key to understand. The DSM, the Bible of Psychiatry and Psychology, says whenever the cause of trauma is human in nature, the degree of trauma is usually more severe and long-lasting. Think about that. Whenever the cause of trauma is human in nature, the degree of trauma is usually more severe and long-lasting.
That's really profound.
So think about
so a firefighter who loses a comrade to fire or typhoon, any natural disaster, versus they were killed by a human.
Yes. See, two scenarios. Scenario one, a tornado hits a house while you're gone and puts your family in the hospital. How do you feel about that one? Thank God they're alive. Scenario two, criminals break in the house while you're gone and beat your family into a hospital stay. Now you feel that physically it's identical. Psychologically, it's all the difference in the world. So here's the key. The idea that a human being could come in our church and kill people is just so horrific, is just so unthinkable that our only response is denial. And denial kills us twice. Sheepdogs strip away denial. Sheepdogs embrace the responsibility to protect. You know, I know who my shepherd is, the great shepherd. I'm a sheepdog under the authority of the great shepherd. And one day the sheepdog will finally rest at the feet of the great shepherd. Well, you're going to hear those words, well done, thou good and faithful servant. But the sheepdog understands that the wolf is out there. And we are a nation of sheepdog. We are a nation that is given the authority to protect ourselves and protect others. And there are one or two sheepdogs in every house of worship. It is a ministry. There are people who will come and serve who would not otherwise have come. And so I tell people about training to a standard. And there's a continuum. Start with pepper spray. Our little church has a preschool. Our little church has, Sunday school and daycare. And all of them were given pepper spray. And the insurance company says, great idea. Just be sure you give them a class. Be sure you give them a class and document the class. And everybody has pepper spray, just the first step in our little daycare. As we go further up that continuum, there's so many other things we can be doing. 2 out of 3 incidents in house of worship happen outside. At least half your resources should be dedicated to the parking lot. Church security team, church safety team, church assistant team with a big magnetic sign. People's car didn't start, people are out of gas, people in the parking lot. It's a ministry. See who they are, take care of them.
Yeah.
But have somebody watching the 6 and somebody watching left and right. Have your team alert 360. But understand that as you come up higher to armed security, the next step is setting a standard. I got my concealed carry permit. I want to be on the security team. Good, we want you. This is a ministry. But we're going to be on the range next week, and let's see how you shoot. And if you don't shoot up to standard, we'll bring you up to standard.
Yep.
But there are many things you can do in this house of worship. And the single most important thing we can do is hold it up in prayer. When everything else is helping, there should be somebody whose job it is immediately to pray. And never forget the power of going straight to the Father in a time of great need. Keep your eyes open, keep your back to the wall, be ready to murder. But when bad things happen, there should be people whose job it is to immediately start praying. If you choose to use armed security, and I think it's a good thing, establish a standard and hold people to that standard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not saying you can't carry a gun if you haven't got 18,000 hours and can't shoot to this level. But usually the baseline standard is the standard for law enforcement, which is not as high as you might think it is. It's not that hard to make. And I'll tell you an angle on this is armed educators. Across America, we've got 85% of all the counties in Ohio have some armed educators. Did you know that? Ohio doesn't.
Professors, teachers, that kind of thing?
Yes. Well, here's what happens is in Ohio, they have something called FASTER, Faculty and Staff Training for Emergency Response. It's a 3 or 4 day class. And at the end of the class, you qualify, and the standard for qualification is above the standard for law enforcement. Now, the educators who aren't in the schools have to be nominated. The educators are nominated by other educators, and then they're held to a standard. You don't just go to a 3 day class and walk out the door shooting better than a cop. You've got to have that skill already. So a reporter from the London Times came and took the 3 day class. This is in the London Times. He said, I would have never thought I'd say this. If this is the standard they're being held to, I support the idea of armed educators. Anybody see that in the U.S. news? Anybody see that in the media?
Never.
85% of all schools in Iowa, all counties, have some armed educators. A reporter from the London Times came and took their class, held to a higher standard than law enforcement, and that don't happen in a 3 day class. You got to arrive with those skills already. And it's happening across America. Utah's had armed educators since Columbine in virtually every school. Around America, half of all schools in Texas have some arms, and this is exploding. The same thing is true in our houses of worship. Set a standard and train to that standard. We presented our Sheepdog, and go to sheepdogseminars.com, sheepdogseminars.com. We've been doing this. We've done over 100 of these. Before 9 people murdered in a Charleston AME church, before 26 people murdered in Sutherland Springs Baptist Church, we've been teaching. Every year, without fail, more people are murdered in houses of worship than schools. And we got the data to support that. But we trained in one mega church in Montana. And they had a U.S. senator in their church. They had several federal judges, and they took security very seriously. Now, they had rifle-armed security in the congregation, but you would never know it. It's in a music case. It's in a music case.
Rifles in a music case.
He's got a music case up on the balcony. You know, he's a musician. He just happened to have his music case with him. You understand? And they've got an rifle-armed team ready to punch out from a central location. Always the bad guys do distractions. We give a case that happened in a church in Colorado where he had 2 distractions. He dropped a smoke bomb up front, a smoke bomb in the back, and then began to murder people in the parking lot. Tragic murder of a family, and then moving in. Armed security responded to him, and one of our trainers in our class is one of those armed security that responded to this guy when he committed these murders. So we say you have a reserve, and don't be drawn away from your sector, because a bad guy could have a distraction. And so we got people who respond and people who stay on site. That's all about training and preparation. And so these guys had a central war room, and somebody is praying for the safety of that congregation constantly. And they're watching the videos. A TV monitor just gives you a very well-documented crime. The camera by itself doesn't stop anything. The Columbine killers posed for the camera. The Columbine killers on the cover of Time magazine twice, and the cameras shot the footage for them. So if there's somebody ready to respond to that camera, that's a different story. So they got their central room. They're viewing cameras. They have rifle armed and bullet plates. They got full plate carriers ready to respond out. They've got rifle armed people in the perimeter ready to respond. It's not overwhelming. It's not like they got 30 people there all the time, but they got a dozen ready and prepared constantly. Plus, if concealed carry is allowed outside, it's allowed inside. You're not one of our team members, but we work with you. We know you're there. We know what you're doing. And so we got a continual responses beginning with pepper spray in our daycare, working all the way up, have an armed team ready to punch out, and somebody constantly praying and lifting up the safety and the response team in prayer.
There's the both prayer and action. Do you recommend that churches maybe advertise that this is a hard target? I'm thinking of the neighborhood where one of 5 houses has an NRA lawn sign. Which of the houses is a bad guy not going to rob, right?
Exactly. Well, what we tell people is, and really Carl Chin, Chinn, Carl's just an old, he'll tell you, he's old Colorado farm boy. That he was there at Dr. Dobson's when a man held him hostage with a bomb, and he was responsible for security at Focus on the Family. Dr. Dobson, he was there when the church in Colorado Springs was attacked, and he was head of security for that one. And he started a national church safety organization. It's a church-based faith, and I'll give you the exact. It's a church-based faith initiative, America, and I'll give you the link to them.
Okay,
and they're setting up standards. They're setting up national standards and national and they've got committees, and they're really doing it right. And they generally, it's up to you. Nobody can tell you what to do. They generally discourage saying we have armed security on site. It's just too much of a distraction, too much of a dynamic, driving away people. That we need to do it subtly, and we need to have it quietly. And there's nothing wrong with telling people if they ask. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not some big dark secret.
Yeah.
We don't put it up. And if people choose to do that, then good for them. We are such a vast nation. We have such diversity of cultures and dynamics within each state and across our nation. There is no Canada plan. There is no answer for everybody. But there are general guidelines and the Faith-Based Security Network, FBSNamerica.com, Faith-Based Security Network. And they're setting up best practices nationwide. But all these are as general guidelines, and they generally, it's a neat idea having the sign out front that says, I'm an armed house, and my neighbor next door doesn't believe in guns. Which one are you going to rob? But those signs are really actually pretty rare. NRA signs are pretty rare. But schools, now school's a different story. We've got schools that say there's armed security in the school and prepared to respond and protect our children. And they've seen a lot more of that. And it's another interesting dynamic as to the values of that. Our schools, we got to get control of our school boards. Our schools do what the school board tells when you elect the school board. You should be deep in school board elections. And one of the great things that's happening is taking the money and saying, you decide where to put that school money. Our parochial schools, our Christian schools, our private schools, our homeschoolers, we're starting to take that money nationwide and saying, you can put this money wherever you want to put it. So get knee-deep school board elections and school board politics, but we're seeing a little different dynamic in the schools. We've actually seen schools that put signs out front. We have armed educators ready to respond, and we have armed personnel ready to respond and fight for our children's lives. And there's never been a multiple homicide in a school with an armed cop present in the building. Columbine never got in the building. Parkland never got in the building. There have been some solo homicides, but there's never been a multiple homicide in a school with an armed cop present in the building. There's never been a homicide, period, in a school with armed educators. Now, we're pretty confident of that. You can't prove a negative, but if it had happened, if there had been armed educators and somebody died, you'd hear about it.
Of course, yeah. Plus, it stands to reason.
Yeah.
Now, you have been paratrooper, Army Ranger, and your first book made a big splash, The Psychological Cost of Learning to Kill in War and Society, on killing. You yourself have never killed.
Yeah.
Right?
And my war was a Cold War. Grenada was a day, Panama was a day, Gulf One was 4 days. You made them all, and I didn't. They wouldn't add up to a week. I got a boy with 9 combat tours. Those kids see more in a week than we would have seen in their whole careers. Just one little dynamic on that. The fact that the shots get muted in combat. Every hunter, when you ask hunters, they'll tell you, you shoot a deer, you don't hear the shot, and the ears don't ring. Now, how could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and not let people know the shots get muted? So what the Vietnam veterans told me early on, and what others have told me since, that said, if you had been in combat, you would not be able to talk about these things. You would not be able to intelligently, academically address these things. Maybe so. I think God's in control. Every step of the way, I move toward the sound of the guns. I carry the guns. I train constantly. I'm prepared. But so far, praise God, never had to use those skills. But I really think that God is in control from the very beginning. And if I had been there, if I'd have been another Vietnam veteran, I came in right after the war in 74. If I'd have been another veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, it would have been very difficult to have talked about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But then God gave me a specific path and specific dynamics to make it turn out that way. And I've had so many people tell me, man, it would not have been possible for you to do what you do if you'd have done what we did and seen what we see. There's a weird dynamic where nobody else has ever talked about these things. And it took a very unique circumstance to make these things happen.
Well, I think that's also providential. My analogy here is celibate priests who counsel married couples. You think, oh, what's a virgin going to tell a couple who's sexually active about anything? Well, actually, if you're a celibate counselor, teacher, kind of shepherd, you don't have certain dogs in the race. You're able to see things more clearly because you're not identifying with the husband or the wife. And when you go through hundreds of couples with the same basic problems, it gives you an edge, actually. You see the analogy here, right?
That's brilliant, Patrick. It is a great analogy. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to start running with it.
Well, you know what they say, the good borrow, the great steal.
Amen. Amen to that. I think along those lines, God had a plan from the very beginning.
Yep.
I just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and I praise him every morning for the gifts that he gives us, and I ask him for protection every night when we go to bed.
You write about the analogy to the lack of study of soldiers who kill and the effects in their lives and the lives of their families, but also the ones who choose not to, and the low rate of soldiers who actually shoot in war. You've got studies from the American Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Talk a little bit about this relatively small proportion of soldiers who act. I mean, this is it kind of blew my mind. You think because I was shaped by Hollywood, right? Everyone's rah. If it's not Full Metal Jacket, it's the John Wayne thing, right?
So here's the deal. Inside, again, the hard thing to explain is not that 1 in a million terrible crime. The hard thing to explain is that 99.9% of our citizens go a lifetime, never kill anybody or even attempt to. Explain that. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic. Every human being has vast numbers of provocations that would set us off. And yet at the moment of truth, we didn't even seriously attempt to take a human life in a lifetime of provocation. Inside most healthy members of most species is what I believe is a God-given protection against killing your own kind. A piranha will sink their teeth in anything that hits the water, except other piranha fight each other, flicks of the tail. Rattlesnakes will sink their fangs in anything and everything, except other rattlesnakes. They wrestle each other.
Interesting.
Animals with antlers and horns fight each other head to head the most harmless way. Any other species that go to the side, they gut, they gore. Inside most healthy members of our species, every one of us has been enraged. Every one of us have been red with rage. Why didn't we pick up a steak knife and kill him? As children, we were overcome with rage and anxiety and angst. Why didn't we kill? Well, we didn't have resistance to killing. And so in World War II, we really became aware of it. Only about 15 to 20%, at most 1 out of 5, of the individual riflemen would pull the trigger. Now, if there was a leader demanding they pull, everybody fires. Leader leaves, they stop shooting. If it's a crew-served weapon, where we disperse the responsibility, or a key weapon like a BAR or a flamethrower, they almost always fire. But the individual riflemen left their own devices, wouldn't pull the trigger. And at the end of World War II, we knew that. And so we fixed that. By Korea, we got it up to around 50% or more. By Vietnam, we'd almost completely defeated this resistance. We've made a major step since Vietnam on not just firing, but firing accurately through some very realistic simulators, video games, basically. Modern cops and modern military train on video games. We overcome that resistance like a pilot in a flight simulator, like a kid in a fire drill. Yep. Modern training is killing a conditioned response. And we overcome that God-given resistance. And oh, by the way, the video games are doing the exact same thing to our kids.
Yeah. First-person killing games, yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole dynamic of how we've learned to make it possible to overcome that resistance to adults under discipline. And we're doing the same thing to our children. You know, I tell people, if it troubles you that we're making killing a conditioned response under authority, under the proper circumstances, with adults, soldiers, and military, if that troubles you, military and law enforcement, how much more so should we be troubled that the same thing is being done to our children?
Yeah.
I tell people, I played those games, I'm not a killer. Not every kid that plays a game becomes a killer, but all of the killers played these games.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I never buckled my seatbelt. I'm just fine. We grew up in the 1960s. Nobody buckled their seatbelt. We're all just fine. Not every kid with a buckle died. Most ones that died had the seatbelt unbuckled. Today we understand that having your kid unbuckled is unacceptable. Right? But it had to be the law before we really understood that. The city of California tried to make it the law, and the video game industry fought with vast resources and great amounts of money to sell any game to any kid at any age. That's in the book, Assassination Generation. So I understand that we know how to take healthy adults and make them capable of pulling the trigger. And we know darn well the games are doing the same thing to our kids. Not all the kids that play the games become a killer, but most of them become vicious little bullies. Here's the key, and I tell everybody, the bullying. Everybody out there, even you ladies, who one time or another we played toy guns. Bang, bang, I got you. No, you didn't. So you smack them with your cap gun. It leaves a mark and he cries. If you gather around the hurt kid, try to convince him not to tell mom. All right, somebody gets hurt and the play stops. Basketball game, football game, when the players get hurt, the fans go silent and the play stops. In the video game, you blow your playmates' heads off and explosions of blood. They beg for mercy. They bleed and writhe in pain. Does the play stop? You get points. This is pathological play. This is dysfunctional play. It creates bullies who take pleasure from inflicting death and suffering. Can you not tell the difference between healthy play, somebody gets hurt, the play stops, and the video game, where we reward you for inflicting death and suffering? So what these games are doing is creating this vast number of bullies who sincerely take pleasure. Do you remember when you were a kid? All of us remember that bully who took pleasure in making us suffer. There's many, many more of those kids out there today.
Sure. Literally being incentivized to be malignant, narcissistic, sadistic.
Yes. And to distance ourselves, and now everybody wears a mask. And so we get even greater distance and even greater anonymity to create these terrible acts and to say these things we had never said in person, or we had never said if we didn't have a mask on.
Yeah, I guess one distinguishing mark between a sheep and a sheepdog is the sheepdog is willing to uncover uncomfortable truths. Like when you showed me the data from Interpol and it just suddenly disappeared, that's a sheep attitude, right? Yes. Oh, it's an uncomfortable truth. It makes me uncomfortable. That's so horrible. I'd rather just shut down and deflect and deny.
The birth rate's being held down by medical technology. It's actually many times worse. Wait, is that not, boom, immediately obvious? You immediately grasp it. But that's not information they want. The sheep that's unpleasant information, and so they just push it to the side. I presented over 100 universities and colleges. I was a guest criminal justice presenter, the CJ Day. All the criminal justice and criminology professors, the students, the alumni, the local police invited in. The first thing I'm telling them, the entire field of criminal justice, criminology failed, fundamentally flawed, because we don't let people know the number of dead people horrendously underrepresent the problem. And it comes back to that same sheep mentality. Unpleasant truths, we turn it off. Meanwhile, the media is invested and telling you there is no boogeyman out there. So this horrendous explosion of violence in 1915, in 2015, 16, 17, the Ferguson Effect, and now on top of that is the current violence happening around America. And it all comes back to this one dynamic, the desire to hide unpleasant facts, the desire to simply put it under the rug. And meanwhile, the people who have blood on their hands are desperately involved in a disinformation campaign, desperately trying to point the finger somewhere else. Oh, it's all about the guns. The guns didn't change. We changed. Our children changed.
Yeah, this is why the slogan of Coffin Nation is "We go there." You mentioned at the outset you've got an anecdote from Garrison Keillor on the hog slaughter, and it got me thinking about how our culture is a culture of the denial of death. Ernest Becker wrote a book by that title from Simon Fraser University, The Denial of Death. We put makeup on our corpses. We don't ever see how the burger becomes a burger on our plate. We're utterly disconnected with the ebb and flow of nature. After the Industrial Revolution, fathers separated from sons. Things became factory-based and not land-based. And so now we're just inert or blind or numb or just sheer ignorance of how closely interwoven killing is to our very sustenance. And you point out there's a lot of analogies to sex here. We study sex constantly, from a distance, clinical Masters and Johnson kind of stuff. And then you've got all the research uncovered by Dr. Judith Reisman, our mutual friend and exposer of the sex crimes of Alfred Kinsey. And one thing I never thought about is that in generations past, families lived in large homes. There wasn't a kind of this apartment mentality where sex became a singular, utterly private thing. And then it became taboo, right?
We're in a hut, just the whole family in one hut, the whole family in one cave or one hut. And there was no separate room where terrible crimes could happen. And then all of a sudden we went to with a middle class and an upper class had separate rooms. And suddenly sexual abuse became possible. Mm-hmm. Previously, when everybody's in a common room, that's all there was throughout human history. Everybody around a common fire in a hut. And then we had separate rooms and the dynamics completely changed. And we talk about that more in On Killing. Yeah, that fundamental change. So the sex dynamic changed fundamentally. Our isolation from sex, our divorcing from the normal interaction of life. In the same way, even more so and far more harmful, is our separation from the action of killing. Your body right now is killing millions of microorganisms. When we stop killing, we die. Millions of rats and mice had to be exterminated around the elevators. The grain elevators? Well, I'm a vegetarian. Well, in order to be a vegetarian, we had to exterminate millions of rats and mice around the grain elevators. Because if they got on that grain elevator, they would reproduce exponentially and we would all starve.
Yeah.
Whether you're vegetarian or not, millions of rats and mice had to die to sustain you as a vegetarian. And that's just the nature of life. Life is about killing and ultimately about dying and facing our maker.
Yeah.
But we flee from that whole dynamic. And there's this flee from death and fleeing from the reality of the battlefield is part of it. I tell people one of the best ways to prepare for combat is hunting. From your youngest days, you know what's inside living creatures, and it means food on the table. Yeah. You've experienced the dynamic is called buck fever. I've got a book coming out shortly called On Hunting, the psychology, physiology, and ecology of man, the hunter, and man, the predator. But we talk about how the only thing that we do that taps into the survival mechanism of combat is hunting. Hunters don't hear their shots. And we're tapping into the same thing that people experience in combat, that muted sound. That it's the only thing we can do that taps into the same toolbox that combat does, is hunting.
Yeah.
And all you people out there who never hunted, think about pushing the envelope.
Yeah,
and moving in that direction.
I wish I had as a kid. I came late to bird hunting, and I remember my first trek out in rural Minnesota. Stepping out of that truck, seeing the dogs bound off, full of dog joy. They're doing what God made dogs to do. There was something, I can't even describe it, something primal, because I was going to kill something that I would eat and it would sustain me. And it would kind of break down that mysterious wall of ignorance of how did my food get here? Well, every food that gives us life had to die, whether it's a carrot or, a cow.
My dad never had a chance to take us hunting very much. But I thought it was my job as a grandfather to take my grandchildren hunting. So my little grandson goes to deer camp. He gets out of school for a week, grubby, nasty, dirty for a week. He comes home and his mom said, "What'd you like the best?" He said, "Gutting the deer." For a little 7-year-old boy, gutting that deer was fascinating. He sees the guts and the stuff and the smell inside living creatures. And that's something he knew from his youngest age. We cut the backstrap out. We cook it right there on the spot. And it means food on the table. And he's in tune with life. If the first time you ever encounter the smells and the sights of what's inside a living creature, some horrible crime scene, some horrible combat scene, some terrible accident, we've set you up for trauma. You should encounter those basic fundamentals of life when you're young, in the hog slaughter, or when you're wringing a chicken's neck, or when you're hunting with your father or with your grandfather, and getting them in tune with nature as God meant it to be.
Dave, I could go 9 more hours minimum, but let me close with asking about PTSD. I lived about a quarter of a mile from Chris Kyle, the American sniper. And did I just misremember his name?
Yes.
American sniper.
This guy.
I knew one of his trainers, and I know the story of him befriending someone who had PTSD. The D part kind of bothers me. I want you to help me sort out why it's called a disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder, is it called a disorder because it's a failed strategy to not get help? Because it seems to me that all of the shutting down and the all the defenses that God gave man to protect himself from trauma, that seems like something going right, not something going wrong. In other words, if someone has PTSD, is labeling them with something wrong with them adding another layer of shame rather than saying, look, do you see what I'm getting at?
Oh, yes. First thing to understand, I all of my audiences, I use screenshots, and this is right at the VA website, Public Health, PTSD in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what it tells us is about 16% of the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD. 11% of the ones who didn't deploy have PTSD. About 1 out of 10 adult citizens, you push the right button, get a post-traumatic response. But basically, 5% contract PTSD. I presented at national and international psych conferences. And saw some British guys say, "Oh, the British troops don't have 5% PTSD. Why are the Americans so much higher?" They're not. It's a lie. It's a smear of our veterans. A Vietnam veteran was spit on and called baby killer. Today, they're victims of an evil. That senator from California says all veterans are damaged goods. All veterans are broken, never be fixed. You can't ever trust a veteran again. He's been broken. About 5% contract PTSD. I tell people, understand that combat will make you stronger. The World War II generation. We all saw Saving Private Ryan. Saw what the World War II veteran lived, but not for a one-year rotation, year after year without end in sight. They were the greatest generation. What doesn't kill us only makes us stronger. Nietzsche, he stole that from the Bible. Romans chapter 5, we glory in tribulation. For tribulation, work of patience, patience, experience, hope, and hope maketh not ashamed. Nietzsche stole that from the Bible. The idea that bad things in life will make us stronger is not a new idea. So the pity party waving the victim card, that's the new idea. So understand that PTSD is quite rare. Now, the state of California, the broken clock is right twice a day. The state of California says call it post-traumatic injury. Now, that's a good idea because you recover from an injury.
That's getting at it, yeah.
And what I tell people is this. Post-traumatic stress is like being overweight. Post-traumatic stress disorder is obese. It's debilitating. We use the word PTSD far too lightly. A lot of people have post-traumatic stress, and we're made stronger and called post-traumatic growth. Vast amounts of research on post-traumatic growth. That's what Romans is talking about when it says we glory in tribulation. Yeah. We grow from bad things. It makes us stronger. The World War II generation, the greatest generation. So about 5% contract PTSD, number one. Number two, we're darn good at treating it. We get better every day. One of the great lies out there, I show people, here's the cover of Newsweek magazine, breaking through that radical therapy for treating the untreatable victims of PTSD. There is no such thing. We're darn good at treating PTSD. We're darn good at treating it, get better every day. They had to go on, they electronically, Newsweek changed that headline. We look up the original headline and the original magazine. They went back and changed it EYs because they thought they can't help. But this idea that PTSD is for life, that we get better every day. And I always use a case. You talk about Chris Kyle, talk to you about Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor. Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor. The entire SEAL team's wiped out. He's captured. He's tortured. Very bad things happen to Marcus. Marcus Luttrell has a podcast called Team Never Quit. I was on his podcast a while back and got his permission to talk about him. Across all the years, couldn't talk about Marcus Luttrell. Now I can. I have his permission. I trained Marcus Luttrell's unit before and after that incident. Marcus Luttrell's doc told me he came back to that incident and he was 500 pounds PTSD, totally debilitated. A year later, he was 50 pounds PTSD. He wanted to deploy again with the unit. He did. It was a good thing. I told him at the time, look how far you've come in just the last year. Yep. Your doc tells me you were 500 pounds PTSD. Now you're 50 pounds. Look how far you've come. Have confidence you can come farther. Today, Marcus Luttrell tells us he is 100% post-traumatic stress free. It took years, but that man could come to the other end, completely free of post-traumatic stress. Not just post-traumatic stress disorder, but
Sure.
come away from post-traumatic stress and have post-traumatic growth. If he can come out the other end completely free, anybody can. If you have loved ones who think they're trapped in a lifetime of PTSD, you tell them medical technology moves on.
Mm-hmm.
If we had cancer, we'd turn the internet upside down to find the greatest breakthrough to give our lives back. And if you've got loved ones who think they're trapped in a lifetime of PTSD, you tell them that medical science moves on and get out from under that burden. Marcus Luttrell is one of those people. He got out, they tried to hit him, oh, you have disability for PTSD. No, I don't. He said, I'm fully recovered. I don't want your disability. They tried to force it. A lot of people said they were angry. This little toad tried to tell me what to say so I get disability for PTSD. I don't have PTSD. I'm stronger from my experience. The tier 1 elements, as they get out, they keep running into this stuff and it enrages them. But when we cut right down and we measured about 5% contract PTSD, and we treat it, and we're darn good at treating it. And don't think your loved ones have to be in a lifetime of mental illness. Mm-hmm. Do what you need to come out the other end and know you'll be stronger. And in the end, our strength comes from the God. Our strength and our healing comes from having God in our life and the saving grace of Jesus Christ in our life. And in the end, really, the ultimate solution to all of life's problem is God and Jesus and the price that he paid on the cross for us to have eternal security. My book on spiritual combat, we talk about that in detail. All right, that's my 2 bits on PTSD, fast and furious. I hope it's of value.
No, definitely. I was thinking how valuable someone like Marcus Luttrell would be as a seasoned replacement soldier to go back in, you know?
Who would you want to stand next to on your next gunfight? You want somebody who's already been there.
Yeah.
And they're stronger from the experience. Those are the veterans that you can lean on and depend on. They're the new greatest generation that's rising up from these violent times.
One of the early evangelists to Canada was a French Jesuit named Father Isaac Jogues, and he translated the Bible into the Iroquois language. He was a peace broker between the Iroquois and the Huron, and they tortured him. He didn't quite die, but they removed one of his fingers so that he couldn't hold up the host for Holy Mass. So he was shipped back to France. He was feted as a hero. His religious order said, you can now enjoy retirement. He said, retirement? I'm going back as soon as this heals up. And he went back, and he was killed within 3 weeks, which he probably knew. So, there's, what's the phrase? Nothing changed except my attitude, therefore everything changed?
Yes. Yeah. To live is Christ and to die is gain. Maybe the most powerful 8 words in the Bible. To live is Christ, and to die is even better. To live is Christ and to die is gain. What the world says, life's hard, then you die. Okay, you got a choice. Life's hard, then you die. That's option A. Option B, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Mm-hmm. To live is to be in a beautiful, beautiful relationship of life and flourishing, thriving every minute, and to die is even better. And ultimately, we're not given a spirit of fear, but of sound body and of love. And love casts out fear. Oh.
Thank you so much for your time. Dave, I've learned so much just in this one conversation. I know I'll be cranking through all your books. I'd love to do something together down the road, maybe a live stream, maybe a conference, who knows, because you've got so much wisdom and insight based on your experience and your beautiful writing ability. This is the kind of thing we talk about inside Coffin Nation all the time. If you want to go to coffin.nation.com, if you're listening maybe for the first time, every single book that Dave mentioned today will be available at patrickcoffin.media as well as a link, including On Killing, On Combat, The Spiritual Combat, and Assassination Generation. Want to get okay?
Yeah. Also, the Glenn Beck book.
Wonderful. That's right. Control.
And one thing we didn't get a chance to mention was Bulletproof Marriage, 90-day devotional.
This has my attention. Yes.
Bulletproof Marriage. You leverage your faith to your relationship with your spouse. 5 minutes a day. Go to Amazon, look at the reviews. Bulletproof Marriage, 90-day devotional.
Yep.
It's about sheepdogs, and ultimately we're all sheepdogs under the great shepherd.
The great English writer G.K. Chesterton said, "Marriage is a battle to the death that no man of honor should avoid."
I love Chesterton. Awesome. I love his poetry. I love his stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I can tell you're a poet. There's always a Shakespeare. There's a Kipling. Which makes your books they go down. You don't need sugar for the spoonful. So appreciate it very much, Dave. It's been an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Iron sharpens iron, brother. And it is my honor to be able to talk with a brother in this battle, to stand shoulder to shoulder at the feet of the great shepherd.
Amen.
One day, the sheepdog will finally hear those words, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Thank you, brother. God
Yep.
bless you and
All
God
right.
bless America.
You as well. Thanks a lot, Dave. This is the Patrick Coffin Show. Be a saint. What else is there?
Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. If you like what you see and hear and you want to see and hear more, consider joining Coffin Nation as a full member. Just click right here and find out more about what that means. Nipsey, my fedora. That's Coffin Nation, the world's largest online community of culture builders. Click right here. See you on the inside.